The steady and significant rise of Ed Boon and his team at NetherRealm Studios has been interesting to watch over the past few years. From the reappearance of their Mortal Kombat franchise in 2008 with the crossover MK vs. DC Universe in the final days of Midway, to their rebranding under NetherRealm Studios and the full-on reboot MK9 in 2011, simply titled Mortal Kombat, and finally leading up to their latest DC fighting iteration in Injustice: Gods Among Us, the studio's work continues to get better and better with each release. In that respect, it quickly becomes obvious that a lot of wisdom, care, and love went into the production of Injustice. The end result of this upwards trajectory is a fighting game that is remarkably faithful to the source materials of both the DC canon and the genre it sits in, resulting in an incredible title that should provide plenty of enjoyment for anybody willing to pick it up. Whether you're a DC or superhero fan, a fighting games enthusiast, or simply a humble gamer, it's easy to find something, if not a lot, to like.
Human scum. Evil and racist.
The first thing you'll likely notice upon booting up Injustice, following a short but very helpful tutorial, is the surprising amount of options available for play. Should you jump straight into battle mode, or start to hone your skills training? Are you more interested in the story, or would you rather jump straight into a one-on-one match with an online opponent? Maybe you'd even like to mess around with some minigames in the start labs. While possibly overwhelming, the menus are straightforward and simple, catering to whatever you feel up to at the moment, everything from working your way up the ranked ladder online, or just enjoying a good DC comic-style narrative. There's enough variety in the options to give Smash Bros. Series a run for its money. In that first opening tutorial mode spoken of, the game teaches you all the basics of what you'll need to know to begin to grasp Injustice's gameplay, while at the same time revealing itself to be a unique system drawing from several other varied fighters. As in Arc System Works titles, Guilty Gear, BlazBlue, and Persona 4 Arena, each character has access to light, medium, and heavy attack button, with a fourth button dedicated to a unique character attack that does something different for each fighter. Also similar to Arc, constant fighting fills a power meter at the bottom of the screen that can be used to break enemy combos and either gain back some health or deal major damage by betting it against the enemies in a wager system. As in Street Fighter 4, a dedicated trigger button allows for throws, while another, right trigger on 360, R2 on PS3, allows for the use of that power meter to beef up your special moves into stronger forms. Just like in the Capcom vs. series, Marvel vs. Capcom, Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, etc., if that entire power meter is filled up, you can pull both triggers, LT and RT or R2 and L2, to unleash that character's super. Taken from the Darkstalker series, battles consist of hammering down the enemy's single two-tiered health bar, rather than fighting two separate rounds. Adhering to the game's obvious Mortal Kombat roots, actual battle is heavily dependent on lengthy juggling combos and launching moves to deal major loads of damage to the opponent. Lastly, unique to this game, a separate dedicated final trigger allows for the use of environmental objects to inflict damage or get out of tight spots in various ways. All of these details, while a seeming hodgepodge on paper, add up to create a surprisingly coherent and fun experience that is reflective of the over-the-top battles that the comics themselves are known for. Stepping into the gameplay modes, front and center above all else in the game is Story Mode, prominent as the first option in the start menu. Crafted with special care that can only come from those with a love of the DC canon, the Story Mode offers you a glimpse into multiple characters and playstyles while letting you enjoy a tale you would just as likely find in a real DC comic. In an alternate reality, following an attack on Metropolis by the Joker that leaves millions dead, including Lois Lane along with Clark Kent's unborn child, Superman loses all common sense and establishes a superhero-powered dictatorship on Earth, killing any who would stand in his way. Just as the Joker is about to do the same in the main universe, the alternate Batman pulls him and a few of the major DC heroes over to the alternate reality in a last-ditch effort to stop Superman and the corrupted heroes that support him. What ensues in this absurd frenzy, with the alternate universe heroes and villains squaring off against each other as revolt comes against regime. Composed of 12 separate chapters, each one gives you control of a different superhero for about 4 to 5 matches as the narrative unwinds, with one special chapter giving you control of the iconic Joker. The story obviously isn't going to win any awards with its comic zaniness and just above average voice acting, but it's still an especially entertaining tale that's certain to please any comic or superhero fan. First introduced in the story mode, the rest of the game gives you access to 24 heroes and villains from all corners of the DC universe, specializing in either strength-based or gadget-based combat, in addition to standard fighting game styles, speed, power, stamina, grappling, etc. Ranging across the board from the expected Batman and Superman down to more obscure characters like Shazam, Black Adam, and Killer Frost, a fan might find fuel to criticize in that certain popular characters were left out, but what's offered is still diverse sampling indicative of the DC ranks. All that being said, you'd likely be hard-pressed to pick up a character and find yourself not having any fun at all, as you are handily given freedom to unleash all of their major superpowers on other fighters. Each and every power has been faithfully and dutifully taken from that character's comic lore, and implemented with loving accuracy. In that respect, some people have come to criticize the game for lacking balance in the fighter roster. The addition of superpowers to each character seems to work in a way that would normally make a character overpowered were they in any other fighting game. Yet what is unusual about this factor is how it actually plays itself out, in that each and every character has access to some similar type of combat advantage, indicative of the developer's attempt to maintain the super status of each character, with no character ultimately having any major advantage over any others. Whether it's the Flash's ability to slow his opponent to half speed, Deathstroke's power to unleash volleys of unblockable machine gun fire, or Solomon Grundy's tendency to unleash lengthy grappling combos that boost a given stat, one at a time, each fighter has some type of edge over and against all others. Gameplay is thus deepened in that not only must a high-level player be fully comfortable with the standard offense and defense systems common to any major fighter, but must also be fully conscious of how to leverage their particular character's power over the opponent's. Jumping into online play, whether ranked or not, reveals a streamlined system that offers a fair amount of variety while still being simple and intuitively manageable. There are 1v1 matches that randomly pair you up with another player, King of the Hill mode, which allows a group of individuals to take on the king of the group one at a time until the king is beaten and a new one is crowned, whilst allowing non-competing fighters to watch the current match. And finally a survivor mode, which is similar to 1v1 but carries over a player's health and meters between one matches until they lose. It's a fairly basic system that doesn't necessarily bring much new to the table, but what it does actually set out to do, it does quite well. If for some reason you find yourself wanting a break from the frenzy of constant battles, the Star Labs missions are character-specific challenges that specialize in skilled gameplay separate from straight combat. Some are focused on battle-themed challenges, and some are focused on zany and bizarre minigames that seem out of place in any fighting game, besides that made by NetherRealms. But everything offered in the section is fairly fine-tuned and amusing, and it's easy to find oneself stuck playing minigames for quite some time. Lastly, on the subject of positives, a note should be made about the gorgeous visuals that the game offers, especially on higher definition televisions. NetherRealms clearly went all out to make the game look as DC faithful and yet as eye-appealing as possible, with every character showing off some remarkably detailed textures in their armor and equipment. Every battleground hosted backgrounds so expansive and intricate they truly bring the atmosphere of each place, and every laser blast, flamethrower, lightning bolt, and ice breath appearance coming off as particularly convincing. Even in massive, cartoonish battles, the system holds together in characters in a world that appears surprisingly realistic given the source material, making for a rather beautiful-looking game. Even in a title that has been tended so carefully in its gameplay and battle systems, the graphics production has clearly shown the same level of devotion and time, with no expense spared.
Underworld organizations had both the bat and the cat to fear.
One particularly oddity to note is that although NetherRealms has shown some incredible quality of detailed and realistic visual production, Injustice is similar to MK9 in that there appears to be something very off about the characters' faces. Certain fighters have facial features that are passable, whereas others sport something that I can only describe as awkwardly forced out of bland putty. In a title with this high of a production level, it just seems strange that the developer still apparently has an issue with creating realistic and or believable character models aside from the incredible care put into the rest of the visuals. Albeit not an incredibly serious issue for most people who will likely spend time with the game, it seems significant to at least mention the facial abnormality aspect. A fair amount of characters will be ignored, with the majority of masked characters working just fine, all except for Batman. But it should be mentioned that at some point in your time with Injustice, you'll notice that there's something unsettlingly not right about Wonder Woman's face that's hard to put a finger on. Not really a major mark against the game, but something that should at least be noted.
That is our way. You lecture me on the meaning of being Amazon?
In the midst of everything that Injustice has to offer, the only major objective qualm that personally comes to mind is that of the online connectivity issues. Though much better as a press time than MK9 at its own outset, there still seems to be some network kinks to work out. It's rare to find a battle that doesn't at least have some lag or latency present, to the point that occasionally you'll find a fight frighteningly bogged down and practically unplayable. After spending about an hour with the system, via the PSN, drops combos, hits and blocks failing to connect, and frame stutters would all be uncommon, but not surprising, in a number of the matches that came up. In a fighting game like Injustice with incredible potential for a strong online community, it's hard to imagine them completely embracing the game as is. Fortunately, there is still plenty of time for patches and updates to streamline the system and cater as much as possible to the most hardcore fighting enthusiast who may not have a friend handy at all times to go toe-to-toe. As of the time of this review, many of these issues may have been taken care of already. Until then, while still very much playable in online modes, you would be better off finding someone to practice in-person multiplayer matches.
You will submit!
The past few years have been joyous for the fighting game genre, with the rebirth of Street Fighter spurring on a good amount of new titles and ushering the community into a new golden age, greater and livelier than ever before. In following that trend, Injustice: Gods Among Us brings Ed Boon and his team at NetherRealm to the fore of the genre again, with a title, and potentially new franchise, that positions them as probable contenders against Capcom for top developer in the industry for great fighting games. With a colorful and varied cast of characters from all over the DC universe, an incredibly robust and deep combat system that borrows from other titles to create something that still feels very unique and indicative of its ties to Mortal Kombat, breathtaking and detailed visuals, and an absurd amount of content to find joy and satisfaction in regardless of what level of competition or interest you have in fighting games, there's plenty here to keep one's attention for several hours at a time. As I said before, any gamer who has an interest in superheroes, fighting games, or just astonishingly crafted competitive play owe it to themselves to at least try Injustice: Gods Among Us. There are plenty of other gamers who've already taken the plunge themselves, just waiting for your competition to help color the community, and you shouldn't be surprised to see Injustice at EVO in 2014.
He esperado mucho tiempo para esto. Now I break your back.
I award this game a score of A-.